Esteemed colleagues and friends here, I think everybody knows Patrick by now, but in this context, you'll kind of give us a perspective based on your research, aren't you?
Yeah, Patrick Watson, head of research at Cavell. I must, sort of the interest of transparency, there were a few companies in sort of the emerging tech areas of collaboration that we invited to take part that fell through at the last minute. So it was decided, Patrick, why don't you go and be part of the panel? And then what I know will happen from knowing Tom is I'll get grilled about something that I'm not in any way an expert in. So yeah, hopefully I should be able to share some info on sort of what we're seeing in terms of emerging technologies within collaboration.
Thanks. Lee, do you want to give a bit of an intro, please?
Hi, guys. Lee Essex, SVP of Sales and Marketing at Tango Networks. Those who don't know, we're the guys that provide fixed mobile convergence essentially across most UC platforms. So I'm very much from the mobility point of view here.
Yes, we've got mobile covered. That's good. And Rick, I never talk to you without you having some idea, so I feel like you're a slam dunk on this one.
Rick Garcia, I run product and marketing for Momentum. We're a US-based. US.
It's the AI already.
Spooky.
Shh, don't tell him about me. And that's the answer.
What did it find about Rick Garcia? Because I'm interested to know.
Look,
I'm not reading.
let's not look. Don't look. Don't look.
Yeah, so the idea of this panel is to have a bit of a conversation about what the kind of some of the futures could be. We're unavoidably going to talk about AI, right? But it has to be like actual business solutions, not just random thoughts. But before we get into kind of that, because I think that is probably the most disruptive thing happening at the moment, I want to pick up something that was said earlier in the day around the phone number as identity. And like, is that going to change? Has that changed? Early days, we were all talking about federation, and for those that go back, XMPP, and like phone numbers were going to go away, and we were all going to use email addresses. So, Rick, maybe I could start with you, because I know you've been thinking about this a little bit. Like, is the phone number here to stay as identity? Is it the cell? Is it the fixed line? Is it email?
I don't know. I think it's going to be around for a while, but I've been thinking about it for a long time. Like Bill Gates, I think, said something like in 2008, right? We're not going to need a phone number anymore. We're sitting here 16 years later, and we're still on phone numbers. I think as regulatory costs in the U.S., as an example, go up. Like I was laughing about some quote that came out was 100% taxes, right? $1,000 phone bill and $1,000 in taxes in the U.S. I think that sort of drives like, okay, what could you use to replace the phone number as an example? And there's click to call, that's pretty interesting. There's QR codes, so I don't know. There's a lot of stuff that's really interesting, but there's nothing that's ubiquitous just yet that I see.
It's interesting that we went through this phase where lots of the RFPs had, you have to support Open Federation, you have to support XMPP, and the solutions did for a little while kind of interoperate for instant messaging and presence. And then as we went to UCAS and SAS, it got much more walled garden. Lee, on the mobile front, I feel like people are more wed to their mobile number than their fixed line in some cases, or do you see, because you extend fixed to mobile as well, so what do you see?
I mean, we do fixed to mobile, but we do mobile as a number as well. But people are wedded to their device. That's all they're wedded to at the end of the day. And I know we chatted about this the other day, Rick. Is it the number? No, actually, I'd say it's the device they're wedded to. And it's the device they carry around. So is the number here to stay? Yes, because it's the most regulated part and it's the most taxed part. We're not going to get away from that. Are we slowly moving away from it? I think we are. How quickly it'll happen, I don't know. But, it's got to get to the point where it's the identity of the person. And what's the person carrying around, and what we're all reliant on and what we're addicted to is the device. So I think we will actually move to an identity-based solution, but it will be based on the device. If I look at my device now, it'll say, look at me, and I'll tell you, you are the person who can access this device. So from a security point of view, the technology is already there. I think we've just got to wait for the regulators to start to ease their.
But how do I call your face? Like, how do I call your face though? Like, how do I get there? Like, I like it. I like the idea. It's like voice biometrics is interesting, right? There's a company out there that identified whether you're pre-diabetic or whatever it is just based on your voice biometrics. So that's pretty cool, but how do I call that? right?
True. You've got to have an identity.
How can you call a
The identity
face?
is the number. Yeah.
I feel like that's the soundbite.
Well, I was looking back because we discussed this the other day when we were planning the panel, and I looked back through the research that we've done on personal identifiers, and the last data that we had was 18 months ago, and it was exactly sort of what. It was just a mix across businesses, and primarily it's phone and email. Those are your two primary unique identifiers as a technology user. I think it is likely that that's going to change. What it changes to and how quickly it changes. I mean, how many times have we said email's going to die? It never dies. So I can't see the unique identifier transforming your unique identifier changing anytime soon.
I'm still selling fax numbers. So that's we thought that's been.
Yeah, nothing dies. It just has this incredibly long tail. Patrick, talking of numbers, like there was again debates earlier about like how many numbers are moving to the cloud, how fast with the telcos. You guys obviously do tons of research. You look at the different markets. I'm anecdotally seeing customers I work with right-sizing that fixed line estate. Are you seeing that broadly? Again, this speaks to the attachment to the fixed line number.
Massively. So we at Cavell, all of the most advanced markets that we track. So if you look at the US, if you look at the UK, if you look at France, Germany, we've got those markets declining. So the total number of business telephony users declining by anything from sort of 5 to 10% up until 2028, and that might even be on the conservative side. And the reason is for exactly what you said, that sort of rationalization of that user ecosystem. We've just before this, I haven't published this yet, but I had some data back from our latest Microsoft research, and that was more than half of businesses are migrating. And apologies for percentage of a percentage, but more than half of businesses are migrating less than 40% of their user base into the new world.
You unlock these numbers if people pay for the research report. Is that what?
Yeah. what I do is I'm as cryptic as possible, and then as soon as you go through a paywall, then it becomes slightly less cryptic on the number side. But yeah, so we're seeing that. So we're already forecasting it. Across market. That is the main thing that's shrinking business telephony markets globally.
Okay, so I'm going to pivot to the AI thing now because genuinely it seems to be really potentially impactful. All three of the big UCaaS vendors pitched their "we're doing AI is the future of everything" kind of pitch, but specifically in phone, what are you seeing in terms of opportunities that can actually add value to customers? Rick, maybe I could start with you because I know, again, you guys have been looking at ways you could leverage AI specifically in phone.
Oh, man. For the, I guess, last few months, I've been kind of inundated in trying to figure out how to productize, mostly Copilot Studio, right? And just a couple of weeks ago, I kind of thought, I just need to go build this for us as an organization, right? I need to go build it and consume it for ourselves. I need to make buying easier. I need to make onboarding easier. I need to make support easier. I need to do all those things first before I can go productize it and consume it. Because how can I sell it to organizations without knowing, really feeling confident that it's going to drive productivity, it's going to drive opportunity, it's going to.
So your first step is to try and live it, and then
we're going to go live it. So that was I decided to stop figuring out how to productize it and sell it. And I'm going to go live it and deploy it internally first, and use it for things that you wouldn't think of, right? So my first project is a broadband quote / selling agent, if you will, right? So our first project is here. We're an aggregator. We're a global aggregator of network. Network accounts for like 60% of our revenue. And I price every 120 different carriers out. So most people have this, if you're a TSD as an example in the US, a master agent they used to be called, you've got a quoting tool, so you go do all that stuff, right? I'm going to go quote it, and I'm going to go sell it. I'm going to go send a contract out for it. Will people buy it from just talking to someone or talking to a virtual agent? I don't know, but that's what we're going to go try first.
Interesting. Lee, your point of view?
AI and voice is not really going anywhere from my point of view, if I'm honest.
Good, this is what we're here for. I want to hear it.
No, if I look at AI and voice, we're talking about analytics, aren't we? And analytics on voice has been around for a while. I've got a background in call recording, and I've been selling analytics in voice. We now call it AI in voice for a long time. So, is it having a huge impact on me?
Would you distinguish? I feel like one of the sins we all make in this space is saying voice, and we interchange between PSDN, VoIP, meetings. Like, which voice are you talking about then, do you think?
PSTN from my point of view, yeah. So is AI having an impact on what we do? Are we getting drawn into AI sales? Not really, because I think like Rick, people are still working out how to sell it in the voice area. Are we using it? Yeah, we're using it internally and working out how it helps us in our sales, our marketing. So we're starting to use it, but I'm not really seeing a massive impact on the voice side of things at the moment. Can I see that changing again? Of course it's going to change. How? I don't really know, because I think, again, in the voice industry, we're still trying to work out how to productize it, how to commoditize it, how to make money out of it. And that's still not moved from, the likes of CallCabinet doing a really good job on voice analytics, So we're seeing that. Can I talk about where we go in the future? I mean, we own a mobile core. What can we do with voice analytics from a security point of view in the network? Again, there's some things that we start to think about, but we could get carried away very quickly. So an interesting area, but is it having an impact on me? No. Is it exciting? Yes. Do we hear a lot about it? Absolutely.
I appreciate you sharing like where you actually are versus the kind of the pitch. And Patrick, like specifically, I think both Cisco or maybe Zoom and Microsoft kind of said, AI is going to pull phone to cloud because people want AI. How does that reflect in your experience with the customers?
So if we look primarily from the operator side, from the interviews that we've had, we are not seeing the demand for AI capability drive demand for telephony at the moment. And I think that's primarily, and if you look at the Microsoft use case, I think there's a disparity between the commercial model between Copilot and Copilot's capability in Teams Phone and Teams Phone in terms of how much that costs. And I don't think there's a huge driver in that example for Teams Phone. The Zoom example is slightly different. So I was at Zoomtopia earlier this year. The Zoom AI Companion is free for any paid Zoom subscribers. And actually, there's some really compelling use cases in there. Auto-summarization of voicemails, action items, some bits that it will do straight from Zoom Phone. So I think the capabilities I was quite impressed with. Again, from the Zoom partners that we've spoken to, it isn't necessarily driving demand. And I think that comes from some of the research that we've done on the enterprise side, that the enterprises generally don't have a specific use case that they're looking at. They're more trying to drive an outcome. So as I talked about this morning, they're trying to drive productivity and efficiency. They're not necessarily coming to a business and saying, we want artificial intelligence within our phone system. It's up to the provider to say, we can do X, Y, Z with your phone calls. You might be able to do this. So I think that the onus is on us. But as Rick said, I think you have to start at a stage of understanding it first. The vast majority of operators are not set up to sell AI capability. They are set up to sell telephony, traditional telephony services, and AI is a big departure from that.
At some point, they will need to, though. Like, at some point, you need to, because it's like texting 7 years ago, right? So we were, as business phone providers 7 or 8 years ago, texting wasn't a big thing, and this is for the U.S. markets because texting is big in the U.S., So if you didn't offer texting, customers didn't want to talk to you, but they didn't need texting at the time. There wasn't a use case for them at the time to use texting, right? But you fast forward, 4 or 5 years and customers, quite frankly, the U.S. can't do without texting, right? So if you didn't do texting, so if you don't do texting now, you're not in the conversation at all.
But that's like the cloud or capabilities like that. For years, we were talking about you have to embrace cloud, and some telcos were slower than others to do that and got massively disrupted. So I think you're right. There is going to have to be some sort of acceptance of it. How quickly it's happening, I think, is the debate.
But don't you make the point a little bit when you said, for Zoom Phone, it's included as standard. It is. they haven't worked out a way to commoditize it, to make it profitable. They're having to give it away because I don't think people are willing to pay for things like, voicemails and things like that. Are we just tip of the iceberg? But are they struggling themselves to work out how to commoditize AI and voice?
I mean, this is an interesting question across the industry, isn't it? Is AI an extra feature you pay for, or does it eventually just get baked into the portfolio as like obviously you have a mobile app, obviously you use AI?
Yeah, I think we've seen, and that's why I was particularly interested in the Zoom example, because their CEO has said repeatedly that they're not going to make it a chargeable add-on. Although there's bits within the portfolio that are chargeable from their side, but I think we've seen you can find AI commercials done in every different way, included as an add-on, standalone product. At the moment, we haven't seen that sort of ubiquity, but there is a real back-end cost, obviously, associated with it, with the compute and data storage. So I think we're going to see that change. We're potentially going to see more and more people have to charge for it, whether it's on a specific use case basis and it's based on an outcome. But I think at the moment it's also quite hard to measure the ROI impact in terms of some of the AI capability within collaboration.
I think that's going to get easier and easier, the ROI on this stuff, right? As the building of agents becomes a real thing, right? The building of virtual employees or digital employees, the more that starts to sort of sink in and take hold, I think that ROI is going to be really simple, because you're going to be able to say, I don't need a receptionist as an example, or something like that, right? Kind of your basic knowledge worker kind of positions will sort of be something that you can kind of transition to that, and you'll be able to really kind of understand the ROI. I think as overall, telcos are going to have to be the service provider of these things. You're going to have the platforms, Meta, Microsoft, all these guys building the platforms. But ultimately, we're in a really great position to deliver on these services because we're already providing trusted infrastructure for organizations, right? It's just that the telcos and we kind of need to wrap our heads around, hey, our value isn't in the transit of a network or the transit of a minute or whatever it is. The value is going to be a bit different, whether it's a pro services component, whether it's this is managed, that's managed, and we don't feel like there's value in the management of it because I'm not doing something, I'm not transiting that thing. But I think that business model is going to have to adjust, because I think it's going to be it's a massive opportunity, and we're perfectly positioned.
What about AI you talked about agents like contact center. The contact center was one of the areas that came up as potentially there's still margin there. I'm really bullish on AI disrupting contact center. It's really rare we see a case where a technology is both cheaper and potentially better. Now, there's some debate there about hallucination and risk, but broadly speaking, a big part of contact center cost is agents and human agents turnover,
it's the soft,
training.
squishy bit.
Yeah, exactly. So Patrick, what are you hearing in that space? And am I overly bullish on that? Do you think it's going to be disruptive in contact center?
No, I think you're absolutely right. And I think it's already being disrupted by the innovative CCaaS vendors. So if you look at your Five9s, your Genesises, your TalkDesk, a significant proportion of their revenue is already completely comprised of completely automated systems. So if you look at financial releases, it'll be up to a fifth of their quarterly revenue is a completely automated system. And we saw the announcement, Microsoft had done it. I was at WebEx 1, where we saw Cisco WebEx AI agents, where it's completely, if you'll allow them to, sort of autonomous intelligent agents within a platform. So I think there is huge potential disruption from the existing providers. I think what's really interesting as well, and we've talked about this separately, is whether someone comes out of nowhere and completely disrupts the existing players. Someone that none of us have ever heard from. We talk about a cloud-native CCaaS provider. Maybe it'll be an AI-native CCaaS provider who comes and massively disrupts this. If you can get the cost base right, the contact center world at the moment is all generally based on a composite of consumption pricing and user-based subscription pricing. If you could come in as an AI startup with an incredibly revolutionary, resolution, interaction-based pricing model, you could massively disrupt that.
It's the challenge of wanting to disrupt yourself. Like in contact center, those solutions have managed to hold anywhere between $70 at the low end to $150 a seat, and all through that time, because it's business impacting, because it's important. So yeah, do you as a contact center vendor want to replace that with automation?
Yeah, it's turkey voting for Christmas, but whether it comes from outside of that, I think, is the really interesting piece.
That is, I was thinking the same thing as you're kind of going. Are they eroding the volume of seats that they're going to sell, right? Because you're automating things, and I mean, but that seems like it's a logical shift from again, the business model needs to shift, right? Now it's a consumption-based model versus a user, right? Versus a user model.
I want to get into Patrick's favorite subject, XR, VR. So, like, it was 2021, I think, when Microsoft made this big, like, it's all mesh and metaverse, and obviously Facebook renamed to Meta, and that was the hotness before AI came along, if everybody can remember that far back. Apple have come out with their headset, obviously Quest are doing stuff with mesh. Like, have you seen that permeate our space? And if you have, what areas?
No, to a very small extent in really limited use cases, and primarily they are the sort of vertical markets that we've all seen around design agencies and architecture firms. But there's capability, and when I'm talking about the sort of realms of mixed reality, we're talking more about sort of augmented reality rather than us appearing in a virtual submarine together in a Teams meeting, although as fun as that might be. I think really limited scope at the moment. I do think it will grow, and we have, Matt and I have a sort of internal debate at Cavell, and I don't think he's in the room, so I think it's partially on sort of generational lines. I think there is scope for this. We've done various bits of consumer-focused research and generational-focused research, and younger generations are more inclined to use emerging technologies. One of the things that you can look at gaming tech, which generally tends to enter the workplace on about a 5-10 year lag. And the uptake of the realms of mixed reality in gaming tech is massively ahead of where we are in the business world. So I think, although I'm looking at a lot of very skeptical faces here, but I think it's likely in the future that we will see a bit higher, more uptake of the realms of mixed reality, whether it's augmented reality rather than us necessarily appearing in a sort of virtual meeting, right?
I mean, that does resonate with me. So I've got a 6-year-old and a 10-year-old, and a big part of their like after school socializing is Roblox. Like they all get on, and it's obviously all virtual running around and stuff, and that is very native to them. So I can see the logic. I struggle to think of the use case, but again, maybe that's my age. But like they are absolutely socializing in this virtual space they run around in.
And it's less that we'll have to have a sort of defined use case, but as you said, once you're more familiar with that, I mean, the classic example that everyone will be bored of is the adoption of video that only was really pushed by the pandemic. And you can say, actually, what is the use case for me and you going on a Teams call and showing each other our faces? But we still do it, though, don't we? So I'm not demonstrating anything in the background, although I am quite sort of hand gestury. But I think if it becomes the norm and you're used to it, you're much more likely to sort of demand it in an enterprise setting. So I think your point about familiarization is a key point.
Lee, any thoughts on that space?
No, not really. I was just thinking, it's why do you go on a video call? Because we're humans and we like to look humans in the eye. And I think that's why we go on video calls, isn't it? Because we are gesturing and we're doing those, hand gestures, and we show things. So I think I spend probably 80% of my day on video calls. And I always have my video on. It's very rarely I turn mine off. I do go on some meetings and internal meetings, and everybody's got the camera off. I leave mine on because, I'm in sales and people like to look me in the eye.
I only turn my video off when I bang my head on the table. Generally, that's when I normally.
I just do it.
Which vendors are you working with when?
But going back to your point, you've got kids now who are getting used to running around in these virtual worlds. Are they starting to desensitize to the human side of things because they are? Not looking people in the eye, and I think that's probably my concern over it.
Yeah, that is a counter argument, and they have a continuous voice channel up, so they're kind of talking and virtual. I guess the case that we made for that scenario is more the organic discovery. Like a big part of this event is bumping into everybody and catching up. So it's not that Patrick and I set a call up to go meet in a VR space. It's more like a bunch of people are in that space, and now we can have the side conversation. So.
And we did try that a bit during the pandemic. There was software that would allow. I mean, it was sort of relatively basic. You were a sim-like emoji that moved around a sort of virtual space, and you could hear peripheral conversations as they were happening. And nothing's taken off. So I agree that organic, we haven't got that right, but maybe if we did and there was enough benefit for it, and you could, as you said, Lee, maintain the sort of human connection, there would be a bit more driver for it.
Rick, any thoughts on that space?
Oh, it's crazy pills. It's all crazy pills. That's not happening.
I don't know why I became the advocate.
I don't know. No, I don't have any thoughts on it. I think I can't sell it in the next 10 years. So I'm like, how do I drive revenue and how do I drive opportunity right now in the next 3 years? That's
You're not saying anybody here should bet on XR VR as their next big margin solution.
No, I don't identify with the 7-year-old right now. So it's like, but automation and easy buying is kind of, I think, like the next where if I think about where we want to go, where telcos want to go, where I think telcos should. I had an amazing experience. Any Vodafone people in here? No. I had an amazing experience with Vodafone. Now, it may be old and maybe have been around for a long time, but I bought 2 eSIMs, one for my iPad and one for my cell phone. I spent like $40, $38, or 38 pounds or whatever it was, for both my devices, because I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. So, kind of the ease of buying things, the kind of the shopping cart experience, the ease of activating a mobile device. Those are things where we don't do those very well. And I think that's like in the next year or two, telcos could do a lot better job of figuring out how to make buying easy. It's like we're a bit stingy when it comes to things. Like we want a contract and we want long-term stuff and we want to be able to count that reoccurring revenue. But I was pretty excited to pay Vodafone $38 twice, and I use like 5 cents of it. I may not use any of it. And it's probably incredibly profitable for them to not talk to me, send me my contract via email, and me spend $40, right?
Ease of that transaction.
It was amazing. It was amazing.
Customer.
Lee, you touched on it earlier, but like security, fraud, risk is a perpetual conversation in this space, and it seems like that's accelerated with the AI voice impersonation, maybe even video impersonation. You mentioned using the device maybe as a security element. Like what's there?
We own and operate a mobile core, so we've constantly got to look at how we sweat the asset rather than just giving people eSIMs via a nice automated way. That wasn't his Vodafone, but. One of the things we've looked at, again, it comes down to the device. People have a device, and you've got a combination of technologies on the device, NFC, biometrics, So we've done some interesting studies at looking at, just security and entry into buildings or security into certain areas of buildings, hospitals, for example. You can very easily use an NFC on a phone to get you into a secure area. But actually, you've got to make sure that phone belongs to the right person. So just by looking at, facial, biometrics, you can very easily start to layer on security on this and allowing people in. But again, it comes back down to it's the device, so people are wedded to that device and the device is becoming the key. We go back a long time, not so long ago, when mobility was just a feature. It's rapidly becoming table stakes now because it's the device.
You've sort of won me over a little bit, Lee, because I think about that, and if you think about in the future, like that's kind of the steady thing, right? That's going to be in my pocket or in someone's pocket, right? That actual device. Now, what it can do is when I'm sitting here thinking about use cases, I thought it was pretty interesting. Taymor earlier today said, Copilot's the window, right? Like, I guess WeChat does this, where they build everything behind the scenes, right? But I think that's pretty interesting because my use case that I always try to think of from a mobility perspective is I want to be able to do it on my phone while I'm driving. So I don't want to touch it, right? I want to do stuff while I'm driving.
Voice is an interface.
Well, voice is going to be, I think, voice and the device is pretty integral to where we're going.
Yeah, it's interesting. We took kind of a step back in that because, again, it was Alexa, Siri, everything was voice interaction. We had Cortana in the Microsoft space that kind of got killed. But it feels like now with the LLMs and with some of the advanced voice stuff that I know Google are doing and other models are doing and OpenAI are doing a really good job of, the potential feels stronger that voice could be a valid interface.
Yeah, and there's actually a lot of really interesting research. If you look the generational adoptions of voice, the general perception is that voice is less popular with younger generations. It's actually not the case. And the other general perception is that video is more popular with younger generations, which also isn't the case. So voice as an interface, I think that maintains its relevance even in younger generations. And it goes back to your point around the human element. Talking is a completely human element, much more than touch on an interface. So I think that's a really key point, that actually the demand for voice communications and the requirement for voice actually is, will be maintained in younger generations.
I was a big fan of chat for a long time until sort of the LLMs came out, and you're sitting there and you go, oh, this is actually quite capable now, right? And so if you can just talk, because that's a natural thing, that's a natural behavior. There's no behavioral change. It just works with how we work as humans, right? So being able to talk to a website, being able to talk to something, I think it is pretty easy across all generations.
So as we round out our time, like the audience are coming here to think about what's next, I'm going to ask each of you to kind of pick an area you think is worth some focus, considering the community here of telcos. Patrick, I'll start with you. It gets harder as we go down the line, Rick, sorry. So Patrick, where would you say people should focus for kind of what's next in our space?
It's something we've only peripherally touched on, and Lee's talked about it a bit. I think from a telco perspective, the immediate one is hardware. And I'm going very generic on the hardware. I'm not saying what specific thing that is. I'll be on the hardware panel later on and asking exactly that.
You're just teeing up your next panel about it.
Yeah, well, that's all I'm doing is plugging my future things. But whether that's your mobile device and how your collaboration interface with your mobile device, whether that's headsets, meeting room technology. We're seeing huge growth in uptake of meeting room technology. And I think I'm thinking from a telco service provider perspective, if I was looking at an area that I didn't already have, it would be what sort of supporting hardware solutions offered, whether it was starting to provide a mobility solution alongside mobile phones, whether it was meeting devices or more personal devices. But I think hardware is a relatively straightforward synergy.
That's really interesting, actually, because that aligns to what Zoom, WebEx, Teams are all trying to do. So they're definitely, from a partner perspective, I hear them pitching, look, you should get into more of the stack, and rooms and room hardware and device hardware is a natural extension.
And just finally, ultimately, to enable all of the fancy stuff we've been talking about, and I know we've joked about XRV, the hardware underpins all of it. So there's going to have to be this hardware infrastructure ecosystem everywhere. So I think whatever that enables is good.
Lee, without saying extending landline to fixed, what's the area that people should be focused on?
I think Patrick covered it for me. I mean, it is the device. It's you've kind of covered everything I was going to say. It comes down to that.
See,
device.
what we do is we do the planning call. I get all these ideas and I steal them and then sit closer to Tom in the queue.
I'm going to have to start changing my order on these panels.
Yeah. But no, it is. I think if I look at service provider partners, they started to stop providing hardware. SIP phones, it went away. But I think now they've got to start looking at the device. And the device is a mobile device. I mean, traditionally, mobile hardware, the margins are thin because you've got it driven by Apple and Samsung and these guys. But there are other devices out there that's starting to drive some real margins. And if you start stacking up the device and the subscription, the ARPU. I mean, I was talking to one of the major UC vendors earlier, and they finally twigged that they can get 5x ARPU on a mobile subscription as they can a fixed line subscription. So now they're starting to, how do I enable that? And it comes back to the device. How do I enable the device?
Interesting. So 2 for devices. Rick?
He's going to go for XRV on that.
I thought we covered that was crap. I think I'm going to stay sort of near term and go buying process, ease of engagement, those sorts of things are going to be important because the people that can figure that out, particularly like on Teams as an example, it's not easy to go activate Teams. I mean, sure, you got Pinko and New Wave and all these guys in the room that create platforms for stuff like that, but for the
Teams side of it's the hard side.
You can
streamline the PSTN connection, but it's the rest of the story, isn't it?
Right. So it's like the easier you make the consumption of things, right? The easier you are to do business with. The less sort of as much as we're talking about voice and talking, right? If you can make this frictionless sort of engagement buying process, I think that would be pretty exciting.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for coming to the session. Hopefully we've given you some ideas to think about trying to think about futures, but also near term where you might focus. Patrick, Lee, Rick, really appreciate your time. Thanks everybody. Thank you very much.
Thanks.